Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigus.
Valentine Warner has been in the food industry for many years, working as a chef, caterer, food writer and TV presenter. He's also had a fly rod with him from a very young age, and his love for our pastime burns just as bright as ever.
Val, it's great to have you along on the Fly Culture Podcast. How are you doing today?
Extremely well, and having been sitting here at my computer working, needless to say, I've drawn trout over the top of everything.
That sounds very civilised. I'm feeling rather pleased with myself that while we're recording this, that the rain has just come in, and I've been down on the river this morning. The fish were rising. I even caught a few. So life feels pretty good right now. So that's
Hooray.
good to do. So my day's in stark contrast, so I feel incredibly lucky. But I guess I know where your mind is right now. But does that mean you're thinking about fishing?
For the amount that I write about pulling things out of hedges, or the kind of the habits of otters, or whatever it might be, I live in the middle of Acton, so you could argue I'm a complete imposter and a liar. I long to be always want to be on the water, but spend far too much time in cement.
So does that mean that you haven't been fishing recently, or have you managed to get out?
No, I haven't been out. I spent the weekend fiddling around re-regimenting chaotic fly boxes, taking things off the little bit of foam and putting them that hangs around my neck and putting them back in the fly boxes, stretching my lines, cleaning my lines, feeling sentimental about rods that I've ignored, because I feel they have kind of feelings in a way, and you tend to kind of go for your favorites, but then those wonderful old slow, very bendy things, get a bit left behind. So I want to use those. So I've been kind of going through my stuff, reorganizing my office, scraping the mold off my waders, bad boy, and, kind of getting things ready for the year.
I have to admit that sorting fly boxes is probably one of my favourite pastimes. I absolutely love doing it. There's something very therapeutic about it, isn't there?
It is. I rather like doing it in the bath, but of course that comes with its own dangers.
Absolutely. And the rod thing is kind of interesting as well, because I've sort of reverted a little bit, and I've gone back to fishing modern bamboo rods. But I took a graphite one out today and really, really enjoyed doing it. And I know exactly what you mean, because my rod collection was far, far, far too big, and I thinned it all the way down so that it can be one of those days that is so much easier. You say, actually, I fancy fishing this one today. Are you sort of one of those people that when you pack the car, you'll pack a couple of rods in, or you'll say, no, I'm taking this one?
Too many times I have experienced breakages, and then, been kind of, that's it. And I do pack rods, and if I'm not feeling in a hurry, I'll set up, as you were saying, going back to things, I found an old fiberglass. It's got no name on it. It's brown fiberglass with yellow whipping on it. It's really bouncy. And it can be quite problematic if you've got something sizable on there. But I love those old rods. And while I kind of suggested that I didn't like slow rods, I actually almost prefer them, but realize that, on certain bits of water, you want to get a little bit further, or whatever the case may be. So I kind of do jump around between the old and the new, but I've actually quite often with kind of new rods actually have difficulty. I really have to kind of get to know them. It's not my way. So, if that makes any sense at all, but I kind of, go for everything. It really depends on what mood I'm in more than anything.
Yeah, I kind of like that. And I like that idea of going along the rail and say, yeah, this one today and that sort of thing. And it's interesting you mentioned the glass there, because we've really seen a renaissance in modern glass. And I think also aided by slightly the F glass and S glass, a little bit less bouncy and more usable. And it reminds me, I took somebody years ago for the Wild Trout Trust for a day, and he said, I really would like to use this glass rod. And we were fishing a tiny little West Country stream, and the thing was all over the place. He had literally no control, and I had to run back and get a graphite rod for him. But it's been interesting to see. I don't know if you've been aware of it or noticed it, that this looking at older tackle or modern versions of older style tackle like fiberglass is really something that seems to be on trend right now.
Well, I think we kind of move around and quite often look backwards. I've got lots of really beautiful flies and fly boxes actually with the little flipping windows on them, which were my dad's. My dad would be 104 now. He was born in 1918, didn't have me till he was 52. And I came across this box and it's got Fred written on all of them. And then some rather, lots of collapsed flies, a beautiful box of salmon flies, which were all kind of falling apart. But I kind of used those, and it's slightly heartbreaking when you take out a lovely yellow drake from 1930. And, because I can't help fishing with them, and one trout, and they're absolutely spent. But it's been really nice going for it. And then I found these really, I don't know whether they're made of bakelite, but these little shrimps, full shrimps, kind of made of see-through bakelite with all the legs coming down and a little kind of, there's some wonderful stuff in there, and I actually haven't gone through it too carefully, but it's really lovely looking at his stuff and actually using some of it, although I feel slightly forlorn when, I lose them. I'll get them stuck in a bush.
Yeah. I have some flies from AK Best, and the lengths I've gone to get them out of trees and branches and everything else has been kind of interesting. And for an onlooker to try and see me on somebody's shoulders trying to get a fly out of a tree mid-river must look mildly amusing. But those things I think are really important to use as well, aren't they? And I know with bamboo rods, the modern builders of them say that, there's no point you just leaving them to collect them. They spend so many hours building these things. It's much better to actually go out and use them, isn't it?
Yeah, I kind of, you can get lost in this world, especially on, I'm not a great scrawler on Instagram, but, when it comes to the flies, that's where I can get quite lost. And the kit, and there's so much kit out there. There's so much amazing. And I've got, a friend of mine who's very techie. He does catch more fish than me, but I try not to go into that world of, new. I love, old cardinal reels and stuff, and I'll go and get them fixed up and use them. And lines are important, fly lines. I do spend a bit of money, but I think especially with trout fishing, people throw so much money at it, and it's so unnecessary. I went, when I kind of was doing quite well, I'd go and buy some sage rods and stuff. And now I kind of think, well, if I'm going out saltwater fly fishing, take good kit. You need it. I've had, bad experiences where I've fished with inferior kit. But I think when it comes to kind of, dibbling around on, the chalk streams of England, you just really don't need to get too techie, in my experience, personally. I do perfectly well without a million different lines.
And do you find the same with flies as well? Because I've realised that I've cut down the amount of flies that I use, and there's very few patterns that I actually need now. Have you found similarly in that sense that you don't need as much when it comes to fly patterns?
I think, kind of I'm mildly obsessive about kind of clink hammers and sedges, and then kind of a few other things, maybe a Greenwell's Glory or two, and some gold-ribbed hareses and stuff. But you kind of and buzzers. I can get a little bit, they can be very picky when it comes to buzzers. But apart from that, you see people with boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes, and I've got enough as it is. But I think fly shop, buying flies is kind of kid in a candy shop, and you can go nuts, and then you put it all on the counter in your little tray, and you get some horrific. So I try not to fall for that anymore. So I'm rather deplete stuff at the moment rather than stock up.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it's lovely getting a sense already talking with you. Your fly fishing credentials are oozing out. We can hear where you're talking about rods, you're talking about places you fished and stuff like that. And I thought that would be a nice sort of segue to find out where this all began for you. Where did your fly fishing career actually begin?
My love of fly fishing began because of my a very bad relationship with horses. That my dad used to take us to this place called the Ebarl in Montana, which was a dude ranch, and he didn't even like riding, but it was a fun place, and you can kind of go down the river on an inner tube, and you could go and shoot beer bottles down by the it was fun. And but it was all based around riding. And after being dragged through a kind of pine wood with my foot in the stirrup, my head bumping along the ground, shrieking my head off, I just didn't want to ride. And so I was kind of kicking around, and my parents were like, he's got to enjoy this. What are we going to do? And then this rather gnarly, leathery old Marlborough man of a cowboy called John Stone said, I'll take him fly fishing. And I remember the smell of the woods in Montana. I remember shrieking as I saw a water snake gulping down a kicking toad that I nearly trod on. And it was that smell coming off the water mixed with the kind of the heat of the place and the sound of the kind of crickets. And it was just totally encapsulating. And there was this beautiful racing deep blue water. And it was that lucky thing with being a kid is that I think if success happens immediately, you're kind of in. And it was just 10 days like that. All I wanted to do was fish. I caught my first cutthroat trout. I remember smelling it. I can remember the smell of it now. And that was it. And I just wanted to fish. All I wanted to do was fish. And we came home and Dad found some wonderful old green heart rods, which was a rather tragic incident with. I became very keen on poaching because we live right next to the River Kennet, and I was constantly kind of scrambling under barbed wire and ripping my jacket or stuff. But I set off one day with all his old rods strapped to my back, and the car came whizzing around the corner, and I fell off the bicycle and broke all of them. I don't know why I needed to take 5 with me anyway. But everything became about fishing. And then my father's best friend was this very glamorous dowager who lived in Cockermouth Castle called Pamela Egremont. And I started to go up to the Derwent, where we went every year to stay with her. And it was this very graceful, elderly woman who she'd look immaculate in her kind of +4s and stockings and a kind of veil over her head, tied up under her neck with her flat hat on. And she would fish with a 15-foot, very heavy split cane rod and just caught fish like no one you've ever met. And it was really Pamela that started to teach me how to fish for salmon. And there was a rather wonderful day when I went up. I lent a rod to a friend who'd broken it, and I arrived at Cockermouth, and I said, Pamela, I haven't got a rod. And she said, oh, well, you better choose one from the rod room. And there was a very beautiful rod, which was black with kind of purple. It was black and purple and gold. And I said, I'll have this one. And she said, terribly wise choice. That's Cardinal Hume's rod. And I caught 4 fish on a day, which is, I think, the most salmon I've ever got, but it certainly was blessed by the heavens. So it was kind of there, and then always rods in the car wherever I've been. Obviously, I don't poach now. It was one of those things that all children love to do. But whether I'm by a tiny little gurgling Dorset stream, with literally as wide as a table I'm sitting at fishing with a worm on a float, or, at somebody's, farm in Wales where it turns out there's some sea trout fishing. The holidays I book with my girlfriend saying it doesn't happen to be good for fishing. There's always a rod in the car. There's always a rod in the bag. And while fly fishing is my absolute love, I want to catch everything on the fly from a barbel to a carp to whatever. I will do whatever I can if it means I've got to spin or, got to, make a float out of a wine cork. I just want to be on the water.
Nice. I like that a lot. There's so much in there as well. What an amazing place to start your fishing career as well. Which river were you fishing in Montana where you caught that cutthroat that you still remember so vividly?
It was called the Blackfoot River, and it was very it was kind of, I remember it was kind of thick with bushes and the smell coming out of the pine woods. It was so much to do with smells and the heat, and then you take these little fish back with you and cook them over the fire. And it's been a source of food for me, fishing, as well. As I've kind of got older, my killing instinct has left me. I worry about the natural world. I worry about how, we need it. It's our default setting, yet we kind of abuse it so much. But I still, do take fishing for food. But it was when Johnny we were putting all the trout onto a stick, through their gills to carry them back, and a black bear appeared on the other side of and it was kind of inquisitive, and he said, just put the trout down and we're going to walk away. And I just didn't want to leave my trout on the bank, but I was just absolutely not having it. But he kind of said, look, just put them down and we're leaving now. But I was furious.
Yeah, I remember seeing one on the Bitterroot, not a million miles away, and they're quite good waders, and it looks to me like they can get to you quickly if they need to.
If they need to, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you say you took the fish, which I guess you didn't get to take back, but was that part of that process or the beginning of that process between catching your quarry and celebrating it by eating it as well? Was that the very start of it for you?
No, it wasn't really. I grew up to two very accomplished cooks, both my parents. My dad had traveled all over the world and was, a real Epicurean, very, very interested in food. My mum was a brilliant cook. I think he was a diplomat, but also, had a farm in Dorset where I grew up. And I was, from a very young age, very interested in food. I bit absolutely everything, sometimes, meaning a trip to the doctor. But I understood kind of the world through biting it. My dad was passionately interested in nature and the hedgerows, and would forever be kind of scooping up shaggy ink caps and racing them home before they dissolved into ink in his hands, or picking, rose hips to make into cough mixture. And we started kind of fishing among the rock walls and catching rockling and stuff. And Dad was, if you kill something, you have to eat it. He was adamant about that. And then coupled with how I was and my love of food, very soon to me, the world became, and I view people like this to this day to some extent, edible or inedible. And so I think it was very important for me growing up there, because as becoming a cook, it wasn't really all about, things that I could order from my suppliers or the more obvious things, but about this wonderful other world of things you couldn't go to the shops and buy, that you could pull out of a hedge and pick or shoot and fish. So I don't live as a forager, but all these wonderful things, be it trout or ditander or whatever the case may be, come out of these wild places and certainly inform the cooking that I'm so interested in. So, the fishing, in a funny kind of way, I would say that my fishing rod is a kitchen utensil, rather like my wooden spoon. It's absolutely, incremental into producing stuff which I bring into the kitchen. So I kind of see my rods and at one point my guns, but I don't really shoot anymore. It doesn't sit well with me anymore, but a kind of like kitchen implements.
Right. And you say from a sort of a fishing and taking fish as well, you've sort of, you've alluded to the shooting aspect of it. I'm guessing that's similar for you from a fishing perspective. As you said, as you get a little bit older, the need to take the fish isn't as great as it has been.
I think it's about context. I think, it's about mood. It's about context. It's about where you are. If you've got fish in your freezer, why are you killing more fish? So, sometimes I want fish to bring home, but then if I'm on the riverbank, or maybe, I'm, sea trout fishing, and I'll just want to take one for the year and cook it in the morning with kind of coffee in an enamel cup and a bit of bacon fat or whatever. But I don't kill everything now. I think especially with pike, which is something I've become really quite obsessive about in the winter. Big pike, a hen pike. I don't agree with a lot of keepers that pike just swim around killing every trout in the river. I don't think that's the case at all. Pike are carnivorous, so they eat cannibalistic, so they kind of control their own numbers, you could argue. But a big hen pike, a breeding fish, I couldn't. Certainly when I used to, that's a great fish for pike are fiddly. They've got those extra little, Y bones. So big fish are actually quite good to take home for the pot, because it's much easier to get the yield of meat off them without all the fiddling around. And I do like to eat a quenelle de brochet with a crayfish sauce on it and stuff. But big pike, late girls, I'll occasionally clock a jack. But the big girls, I will I'll never kill. And sometimes I want to eat that thing and sometimes I don't. And it's a wonderful thing to let fish go. And then every now and again, I'll knack one. And then but a sadness comes with that. This beautiful thing that you've been looking at is suddenly dead. It's in your hands and it's dead. So therefore, as the cook, I have to kind of honor it into a gastronomic afterlife, so to speak, and, and use it well. And then I will take great care with it, and I will use it for as many different things as possible, and hope to kind of respect that thing that I've killed. And I think, so much of food now is just this want. It's thoughtless. It doesn't actually kind of bring in that whole idea of death and what it is to take the life of something. So it's important to me, the killing or not killing a fish, and then how you use it afterwards.
Yeah, very fair point.
But very pleasing if you've done it yourself. I like, to take anything into the kitchen that you've gone and caught. That's a very special thing to be able to do. And, whether it's a basket of wild herbs or, a fish.
Yeah. Very, very, very fair comments.
Sorry if I was sounding a bit worthy there.
No, I think that's kind of cool. And, I use the word celebrate as well. Celebrate the fish that you've taken. And, I've not taken a salmon for a long, long time now, but we would make a big thing at Christmas to gravlax it if we'd taken one and celebrate the whole occasion with family or friends or whatever it may be. And that was important to us. I'd almost been tempted by pike and trying one, and it was, as you say, the bones that put me off. How would you describe them to eat? What are they like to eat?
Gosh, there's a rather inappropriate term that I have for it, which I won't go into, but it's kind of it's very good smoked. I would also add that coming out of not fast running water because they don't like fast places, but coming out of kind of good, clean chalk streams where you'll find a lot of the really big pike, you'll get a much better result than if you take it out of a lake. You'll get a much, much cleaner fish. They're very good smoked. It's quite, it's very hard to describe. It's kind of a taste that some people don't actually like, but I wouldn't really know how to. I'm normally quite good at I'm finding words to describe, but it's certainly distinctive, but not in an overly so way, but not perhaps for everyone. I know a lot of people who don't like eating it, but smoked, it's smoked, what's not to like.
Yeah, nice. So you're catching salmon on the Cardinal's rod. It's bitten deep, this fly fishing thing for you, and that's continued on. And then you've gone on to study art and were a portrait painter, and then moved into the food world. Did fishing, as that happened, take a little bit more of a backseat? Because I imagine certainly in food that if you're working in restaurants and stuff, that's a pretty full-on existence, isn't it?
You're quite right. I think, weirdly, which I'm not sure how many teenagers do, and it was a kind of odd call, but I was wild as a teenager, and I was kind of going off in a wrong direction. And I was, to be an artist, whether you're good or you're bad or whatever the case may be, it requires discipline and a lot of discipline. And I had no discipline. I was very willful. I wanted to kind of party all the time and stuff. And to an extent, I got worried about myself. And I thought, what do you think about when you're not, doing your art? You're cooking all the time. You're actually spending more time cooking than you're often handing in, your commissions. And I was pretty, and very adventurous cook. And at art college, I was cooking kind of goat on my baby belling or octopus in my kind of bedsit on a kind of, that little double ring button kind of thing. And I kind of realized that food was very important to me, and that by going into kitchens, it would bring discipline I needed. My father had died quite recently, to the point that I started, going, and I needed discipline, and I took to it like a duck to water. And I'm as you can see, because you can see me, even though whoever's listening to this can't, I'm quite a fidgety person. I don't like sitting down. I love standing up. I like spending as much of my day standing up as possible. So the kitchen was a very good place for me because I've got a lot of energy, and I was kind of somebody having to tell me what to do, which I kind of missed from my own father, who'd always been very busy or not there. And so it really suited me, but it did, while I was, I couldn't fish as much. When I was an artist, I was, probably should have been painting, and I was on the riverbank. Best thing for a hangover, going fishing. But then once I was in the kitchen, that's how. But then it turned out one of the people I worked for, called Martin Haddon, in the 90s, who had worked for Nico, was a really passionate fisherman. So every now and again, the head chef and I would kind of, he knew that I had access to some quite good rivers, so we'd go off and fish in some nice places. Yeah.
Nice. And do you think then that, you've described your childhood do you think that seed was always there, and this is where it sort of got a chance to actually be nurtured and actually grow into something? It was always there in the background. Do you sense it was always there, or it was just timing and circumstance that took you in that direction?
What was always there?
Being the food and the collecting food, whatever that may be.
I think yes, but the art, it's kind of, if and this might be an oversimplification, but art and cooking are both, in a funny kind of way, it's about collections of shapes and colours and how you organise them. And one has to taste nice, obviously, and the other one has to look nice, but they share a lot of similarities. And I know, artists who are very good cooks, and I know cooks who are very good artists, but I think it was really I was very interested in nature, as I say earlier, and that idea that nature is food, it's the outdoors brought indoors. I think that although I did the art thing, I was always going towards cooking. I used to take the chair and turn it around backwards and watch my mum cook, and, I was constantly raiding food to the point my mum was like, why are you hammering that cheese? I've just given you lunch, because I loved eating. I'm a man of appetites. So I think I was always going towards cooking, and I think also the natural world helped, got me in there too. Cooking is so much, and fishing and food, it's also intertwined. So I still draw, but food became more important than art.
Right. Interesting. And so you moved on from there to set up a catering company, and then you started making TV programs. And how did you find that process? I guess setting up your own company in itself was a busy time for you, but also being in front of a camera, was that something that came naturally to you?
Well, no, it was very, the catering company, I think, was the point where I didn't want to cook. We had amazing jobs working kind of for the film and fashion industry, doing lots of parties. It was very repetitive, and it was very much about, the whims and fancies of rather spoiled people. And I got a bit fed up with it in the end. And then I kind of moved into, we opened with some, a Mexican restaurant in London, because me and a couple of others decided that there wasn't any proper Mexican food. It was all Tex-Mex, and I was working with these people who really understood Mexico. And then that kind of went wrong, because we were probably all people who shouldn't have worked together. And so then I kind of found myself in this I wasn't working. And I met this very amazing woman called Pat Llewellyn, who found Jamie Oliver and the Two Fat Ladies, and, lots of other ones, did all Gordon's F Word and stuff. And she said, I've heard about you, and apparently you can talk, and you can cook good food. And so I want to do a screen test. But I don't know who made the connection. We never kind of worked it out. And she said, and I did this for 3 years. And then in the end, while I went back into art and was working in an art gallery and just trying to keep busy. And then in the end, I said, look, this is all very flattering, but it hasn't gone anywhere. I'll tell you what, I'll come and work for your production company, and I'll work on other people's ideas, but on the grounds that you help me get an idea off the ground. And so we came up with What to Eat Now, seasonal cooking program, and we got commissioned. So I suddenly found myself on television, and the first iteration that when we filmed it, I was so worried that I got kind of eczema around my eyes and I couldn't talk properly and stuff. And they had to kind of bin the whole program. And they said, look, you've really got to get it right this time. And I had this kind of conversation with myself, and I said, come on, this is all about stuff you know how to do, and there's no reason to be scared, and just buck up. And, suddenly we're off, and it kind of played to all the things that I liked, because I got to travel, I got to learn and be paid to learn from other people and experts. I got to describe things for people, and I think in pictures, and I realized that this is something I really like. I like explaining to people. I like telling stories. I like reminding them of fragile things that I think we'll lose forever. And suddenly telly was wonderful and fun, and it opened up very many doors for me. But I think, again, I was having too much fun. And if I'd been, more sensible, more of a businessman about it, I think I might still be on telly. But if things come, things go, and you move on. And but it was really, really fun, and I enjoyed it, and got to travel. And also, the great thing was that when it got to a point where they said, "Well, what would you like to make something about?" And I could say, "Hook it, cook it."
And tell us about Hook It, Cook It, because I can guess what it's probably about, and that indulged both of your passions.
Well, we made two. We made one called Coast to Coast and one called Hook It, Cook It. And rather annoyingly, television companies do not understand that fish cannot necessarily be caught in a day. So as with both things, there was this absurd thing where they go, right, we're going to set the clock. And it was me and Nathan Outlaw, and the premise was we'd have to catch the fish, then cook what we'd caught and give it to the producers who'd given the other bits around our meal or help us catch the fish, and then they'd judge and one of us would win. But it was kind of absurd in the sense that you had 2 hours with this bloody little clock, which I got so angry one day that I hurled it into the sea and then felt really bad and then had to go and dive for it and find it because I just polluted the sea. But I said to the director, you know what you can do with your fucking clock? And anyway, and then launched it out into and then I got a call saying you're not playing the game. But it was really fun. But, those things are always frustrating with telly because, good really exciting fishing programming, the patience is there right at the beginning. And this kind of thing, it's an artifice, it's a device, but nonetheless it was fun. So we kind of ran around Europe catching things, cooking them, and it was fun. But really good fishing programming, which is rare. That's a whole different beast. Yeah. And it requires patience and discomfort and going to places where you'll get lots of parasites inside you, but you might catch something enormous.
Yeah, nice. And I think sometimes people, and I remember again, I took a group down to Montana, and one of the people in the group had watched nothing but videos of this and was in a frenzy. And then, of course, in the real world, that video probably took a week to film. Yet it's condensed into a 5-minute movie that you think fish are eating hoppers every couple of minutes. And, I had to say to him, look, it's not quite like that the whole time. And like you say, catching for the, I've done a little bit of catching for the camera and for magazine articles and stuff like that. But it is quite pressurized, and if you're doing it for TV as well, it must be quite a pressurized thing to actually do, and can easily, like you've alluded to, take almost the fun out of it, because I guess it is a job as well, isn't it? It's work, you're working, but it must be quite a pressurized thing to try and do.
Well, I'm sure it is, but then I was watching something wonderful the other day about these guys who go off to Africa. Can't remember where they were, and there's this river which they thought had some of the biggest Nile perch in, and they're fishing on the fly, and it's full of crocodiles and hippos. And then there's this amazing moment where one of them completely runs out of backing, and they have to snap off, cut the line, tie it onto the end of another person's reel while they've got this 120-pound or whatever it was Nile perch on, all in pitch darkness, cutting lines and that's kind of, but those things take weeks, and then it's all edited into this wonderful, juicy, exciting thing for you. But I haven't got to do that yet, but I don't think I'm a good enough fisherman to be taken off on one of those trips anyway.
They're always fascinating, those ones. You look at the rod and you think, well, he's using a different rod to he was 2 minutes ago and stuff like that. That sort of, from the inside, gives you a little bit of a clue. Perhaps it is a slightly more drawn out process, but you're also making some gin as well, and that's pretty close to a river that means a little bit to you as well, doesn't it?
The gin, I mean, if I could say a little bit about the gin, we're called Heppel. We're outside Alnwick. And I think at the time when we started making it, there was even an argument by that point as, does the world need another gin? No, we all said. But we kind of cracked on regardless, because I kind of realized with Nick Strangeway, who's one of the world's great barmen, hates being called a mixologist, a proper barman and drinks historian, and Walter, who owns Heppel Estate, that we all kind of agreed that gin was no longer about juniper. There was all these kind of flavors where we really loved drinking martinis, which I think is the best way to drink gin. As I say, it's like an elegant silver brick thrown through the front window of your day. I mean, it could kind of direct hit to the magazine. Your day is finished when you drink a martini. And it was also so much, I kind of like talking about food before what we were discussing. It's about a sense of place. We don't want to import Himalayan cloud melons, or if there is such a thing, but, to put into our gin from all over the world. We have this very beautiful part of Northumberland, in the Northumberland National Park. There is bog myrtle, there's juniper growing absolutely everywhere, there's pines, and there's all sorts of wonderful things that we can use. And the next question was, well, how are we going to make the thing that we're trying to make? So we became quite a techie company where we looked to machinery normally used in the perfume industry, supercritical CO2 extraction and rotary evaporation and ultrasonic disruption, because actually a steel is quite a blunt instrument, and as though it makes lots of wonderful drinks that we love, and in no way meant in a derogatory way, we wanted to kind of reach for something further. So, we're working in this place where, we are bringing in the stuff by the armful, whether it's lovage or blackcurrant leaves or bog myrtle or Douglas fir or whatever the case may be, and trying to make really, really good drinks, which are, really say juniper. And this gin is about juniper. But it very conveniently happens to be on the banks of the River Coquet, which was once one of the greatest salmon rivers in the country. It was certainly a river which was known for very large fish, sadly, and some sea trout. Sadly, that's not the case anymore. But there is a rather lovely pool called the Willow Pool, which I have visited many times, and much to my frustration, I think, what's best for any fisherman living near a river is to be at a point, probably in my retirement, when if somebody says, right, it's on, the sea trout are here, or the salmon have come in on this, Spate River, you can just drop everything and go. That's how I'd like to live. And I can never do that. So, I'll go down to the Coquette in the evening and just see a splash and then run back and get my rod. But I know it's too low, or, whatever the case may be, or there's only a fly rod and I've left my spinning rod in London. So it's never quite as I want it to be. I've kind of hooked one on there and lost it. So, but I've seen so many fish in that river, but I never get to, I'm always up there working, very rarely have the time to go and fish it, which is very frustrating.
Yeah. And so do you get up there much to do that, or are you up there regularly, or?
I'm up there about once, probably every kind of 6 to 8 weeks. But never, it's either kind of raging and I go, I know the day after I've got back to London, people are going to start catching fish, as is always the case, or it's low and I'm leaving as the rumble of thunder is, kind of appearing over the hill. So, the Coquette's a river I really want to go and fish extensively. But, other little rivers I've been taken on, I'm a Dorset boy. I love fishing on the Axe. I had a lovely sea trout last year with the chef Mark Hicks. We were really mucking around and I ended up with a really lovely fish. And then the Coffee and, all those little Welsh. I've fished a lot on the Towie, which is a tragedy. Amazing sea trout river with where 12, 14 pounders are not rare. But you go back to that river year after year, there's terrible anaerobic digestion spills all down the river with no one being penalized for it. You get that horrible kind of smushy silt on the bottom of all the rocks, which are getting slippier and slippier every year. And you just think, what are we doing? What are we doing? Nature is, we can't be here without it. It sure as hell can be here without us. And you go to these very beautiful places. Everyone, when they see a dragonfly flitting over the water, will say, oh, how beautiful, or see a little water vole swimming with its head, kind of. And yet we love it. But then look what's being allowed to happen. And we're watching it die. And The rivers are in a mess. I think the river like the Wye has been very much looked at the moment. I think we're seeing what's happening with all the waste processing plants dumping into rivers. And I just, what do? You feel helpless. You've got all these kind of wild swimmers going woohoo and jumping naked into the water. Have you any idea what you're swimming when you get a mouthful of that? You had any idea how polluted that river was? But, for me as a fisherman, just seeing rivers where there is less and less fish, and which are barometers to health, rivers, certain fish especially, if they're not there anymore, never see the eels in rivers where I used to see a lot of eels when I was small. And it fills me with sadness, and I feel slightly helpless too.
Do you think the damage is reversible? Have we gone too far? Have we passed that tipping point?
What a horrible question. I'm quite nihilistic in a sense, because I feel while you live your life, do it as best as you possibly can. But the bottom line is that the minute, while we say we care about everything, which is very easy to do on Instagram or by signing a petition, the minute it interferes with our convenience as things that we want to give, we want to do, the minute our convenience is interfered with, then it all goes out the window. What do you do? How, we eat too much. But we know that we're scraping, even thought to be up to half the food we buy into the bin. But we're eating too much at the same time. And, you see those awful pictures on Instagram of, people who've come back from a fishing trip with 40 dead bonito on the front of their fishing boat. And you just think, what the fuck are you doing? Who's telling you to stop? So I think until there's some incredibly strong rules in place, and how do you police nature? It's enormous, Do I think we can climb back from this? I think we can make things better, but I rather fear that we're rapidly galloping towards a long drop.
And do you think?
And I wish I could say otherwise.
Yeah, and do you think, we've had Fergal Sharkey on here, who's fighting an amazing fight with others as well, and taking.
Well, I'm sure if I could interrupt you there, I'm sure you're aware of Kim Waters.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do you know Kim, who's working with for the Welsh Rivers Trust?
Yes. Yep.
And it's people like them who are passionate, who don't let people wiggle out. Who are now after people to make sure that things get seen through to the end and people don't get a kind of tap over the wrist for dumping a whole load of slurry into a river. But, more people like that. I'm somebody who, if you wind me up and point me in the right direction, then I'll go and do that for you. I would like to be able to help. I'm rather helpless in working out where to start, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like you've alluded to, the petitions and everything, and I've said on here a few times before that instead of signing nice petitions, we need to go out en masse and perhaps make our feelings known to water companies and stand outside there, whatever it is, when they've got AGMs or whatever that may be, to be more vocal. And you touched on
but I think so too. So too with all of us, I was out in the moors the other day and up at Heppel, and someone had obviously bothered to go there on a picnic.
Yeah.
They'd gone out to this place, but then they'd left all their rubbish there. And it's like, just pick it up and put it in a bag and take it home. You've gone and enjoyed this place. You've obviously been here. You can see where there's been a blanket on the ground, flat, But then you turn around and you walk away from everything. And that is the part of us I don't get.
No. We had the same post-lockdown and Dartmoor and people leaving barbecues all over the place and not caring about it. And it is the wider community that we engage for a short time. And we're going to come on salmon shortly, or very, very shortly, where I think about Panorama had a program about salmon farms. And the next day, the general public from what I'd seen looking at social media and other things. By seeing it myself, there was more salmon on the shelves, but then people forget about it. And then they move on to the next thing, and it may be they're picnicking somewhere nice. And
it's unfortunate. I think there's a very strange thing going on, especially with the way the young learn, but kind of, tactile involvement. It seems kind of more. Lockdown was amazing in a way because people were saying, look, there's more bees in my garden. I thought there was only one bee and it was a bumblebee or maybe a honeybee, but there are these things called red-tailed bees and there's all this amazing stuff going on. And wow, I don't know what any of my trees are called. And, it was great that, but at the same time, we're all so, as I say, stroking the glass hamster all the time, in our phones all the time, that there's this kind of tactile understanding. How do you look after something when you'd actually prefer to be engaged with something which, on a screen? And I think it sounds like I'm becoming a 50-year-old man, or the kind of things that, which I am now, or, kind of things you say to your kids, but it is happening. We're kind of leaving the world and studying it through another kind of flat glass format. And, so therefore, how do you look after something when you're that far removed from it? I think in a funny kind of way. And I'm sorry to be so gloomy, but, as I say, maybe it's just having children and being 50, but, shall I stop there?
No, I think that's exactly right as well, because we've got to say these things and people listening to this will be feeling the same about it. I sort of kind of from a youngster's point of view, and my daughter's a little bit older, but I think about my nieces and they're 16, 15, 17 sort of age. They're aware of it. And when they come and stay, we talk to them about salmon and we talk about how toxic it is to eat. It's not good to eat. What goes into that process? So they don't eat it. And they've listened to that. And they just recently we saw them actually, and they said they were telling their friends about salmon and how it's farmed and how it's not actually good for you. And I think the youngsters are a little bit better engaged than certainly I was when I was 15 or 16 or 17.
I think you're right. Yeah, I've been quite doom and gloomy, and there's a kind of, there is a very kind of, there is an active young, group of people who are saying, look, this isn't good enough. So, maybe I'm talking about it kind of slightly isolated in my, and there's lots of people doing good stuff, but the momentum's got to, we've got a hell of a long way to go, and very, very quickly. Salmon is an issue for me, in the sense, I worry about wild salmon. They leave the rivers small, expecting to pick up, maybe a sea louse or two. You pass through a salmon farm, they might not pick up, they're going to pick up a lot of sea lice, which a small fish like that can't sustain. I think what people really don't understand, positioning of salmon farms is crucial. The shit, feces, excrement, whatever you want to call it, that comes out of those things is in the tons, and it drifts down and sits on the bottom and pretty much suffocate. We actually do have coral reefs in the UK, or we used to, and they get suffocated. There's all, antibiotics. You kind of know the story. What's very interesting is where I work up in Norway, and I'm spending 8 to 9 weeks a year in Norway. There's a lot of research with somebody I've been particularly involved in, going into inland salmon farming, which is a different matter altogether. And actually, I'm saying if there is a good side to it, that's probably the way to go. It's to bring all the fish farms up onto land, water from the sea, and the technology is about to be amazing. Will be passed through incredible filters. So it's filtering it on the way in, it's filtering the water on the way out and catching all that excrement, which can be used for other kind of more beneficial things to do with, agriculture. So really fish farming needs to come out of the water. And it relies on a kind of, obviously it's got its own issues that it's kind of, pumps and energy and stuff, but it's very detrimental, salmon farming. I don't like the taste of it. If you look at the difference between how a wild fish has grown, which of course I don't eat anymore, if you look at the muscle structure, the quality of the meat, you have these salmon things, they're big and they're fatty and the meat falls apart, and it's just not nice. It's not delicious. It's not, so yeah, salmon farmers don't like me. And also, I mean, apart from anything, I think you can kind of fall into that trap where it goes, well, we're organic. That comes with it shares a lot of very similar issues with the non-organic. You know, the excrement things are the same problem. The wild trout, the wild salmon passing through, and wild trout for that matter, sea trout. So, you know, organic isn't necessarily make eating salmon better.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you tell me, as somebody within the food industry, are chefs, when they put salmon on the menu, aware of where it's coming from?
I think some of them are. I think, you know, I think some of them are. I think trout's going to have a better time, farmed trout, because I think some of them are waking up to it. Of course, you know, for any chef who's just been through the nightmare of trying to stay open, especially for smaller restaurants or, you know, whatever the case may be, it's very hard to take something off your menu, which you know that people will order and that you're selling a lot of. So I think that people are trying to source as best as they possibly can. Obviously, it depends on, you know, how, you know, the style and success of the restaurant. But, sorry, that's not said that. That's a bit clumsy. But I think some are, and there's a lot of chefs who are actually being very responsible about, you know, what they do. Look at places like Silo. But then, of course, it's going to remain on a lot of menus too, because it's a big seller. And people want to eat it. As long as people want to eat it.
Is it a big seller, though, because people think it's healthy?
I think there's been so much marketing around omega-3 and good for your brain and good for your joints. And, you know, so's cod liver oil, you know, and so there's massive. I mean, the salmon industry has so much marketing money behind it. I mean, huge amounts. Gargantuan amounts of money to spend on marketing.
Yeah, that's the worry. I think we've just got to keep fighting, haven't we? And try and tell anyone on any level why we don't eat it. And, you know, we're going up to the Spey on Sunday, and we stay at a B&B, and they wanted to serve us salmon. We said, no, really sorry, we won't eat it. And he said, oh, you're not the first to say that. And we had to explain to him why. And it is ignorance, possibly is the word. But like you say, if something's heavily marketed, then they think perhaps it is healthy and they're a salmon angler, so they might like eating it.
But also, wild fish is expensive, and a lot of it comes down to, there's affordability, which is very important for people who, are struggling. Mm. And so it's a very, very complicated argument.
No, that's a very fair comment. And that may be, like you say, and where trout comes into play perhaps a little bit more, and perhaps along the way it might encourage some people to consider trying to catch some as well. And I know years and years back, I used to really enjoy cold smoking them overnight, a couple of rainbow trout, and enjoying them.
Cold smoked rainbow trout, delicious. But yeah, preferably out of a nice, fast-flowing river.
Yeah, or a cutthroat. Yeah. Let's move on then. For where is your passion for fishing right now? You sort of alluded to it, I guess.
I'm working at it. Gosh, I mean, it's very nice that, one place is, I look forward. It's just been the Skray season up in Norway. It's not exactly tough fishing, but going out during the cod migration, it's rather wonderful. You've got the backdrop of the Luften Islands. It's cold, everything's covered in snow, and you're bringing up these wonderful Skray cod to take home and eat. So that's the kind of fishing that I have done recently. Obviously, my desire to travel and to actually, for an extended period of time, not zipping up and down. But, obviously I really want to go and fish in Argentina. I really want to go and fish in Tierra del Fuego. I really would love to be able to afford to go to Jardin de la Reina. I'd love to go Marseille fishing, which I've done back up in the Himalayas, which was one of the most extraordinary trips I've ever been on. Mexico, an amazing place to fish. My permits hanging on the wall in the office, a picture of it. But those things are unavailable to me right now. So it'll be trips to really want to do more sea trap fishing, which I love, and I love crashing around at night in spooky woods, listening out for the plops of, and splashes of hopefully big fish. Pike, I've become totally obsessed with fly fishing for pike. I'm listening to all the experts, from Paul Monaghan, amazing fly tire of pike flies, by the way. Look him up. Ben Bangham has just gone and caught a 41 and nearly 42 pound pike on chew on the fly. So I've got to 28 and a half, but this year I'm determined to go and find a 30. And then to fish on as many wild rivers as possible, wherever I happen to be. The clipped mown banks of, the Itchen, the Test and the Kennet are a wonderful joy. Not exactly challenging fishing. And although I love them, and it's very nice to actually be able to kind of, make a proper pot of coffee and, cook something in a hut, it's quite easy. And there's no pleasure greater than actually catching a wild fish, which is one of the reasons that I really like sea trout fishing. I mean, when you're beginning to nod off, you'll slightly sing stars at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's all getting a little bit trippy. And then your rod's nearly yanked out of your hand because you're beginning to feel a bit sleepy and wondering about going to bed. And then suddenly all hell breaks loose. It's really amazing. And so I want to fish more wild rivers. There's a friend of mine, Andy, who's kind of one of my great friends who lives to fish. And so I'm going to take up more, try and take up more invitations this year to go and fish on wild rivers. And I'm very thankful to all the, the lovely keepers and stuff who do let me fish, the beautiful mown banks of England's famous chalk streams. But I'll be looking for some more wild fishing this year.
Nice. That sounds perfect to me. I can't finish without talking about music as well, because I know that's a passion of yours. And I love the Beats playlist that you post up on Twitter.
Thank you. I stopped doing that.
I know. I remember when they were up there, because it had a beetroot with headphones on it, didn't it? It was really amused me. Yeah, I was a big fan of that. Is there a perfect soundtrack to start a day's fishing or a road trip for you?
I think something kind of, I don't know, quite often when I'm fishing, one of my favorite songs in the world is I Love the Ghetto by Donny Hathaway. And, I play that quite often when I'm going fishing. There's a wonderful song by Grace Jones called The Apple Stretching, which is about New York waking up in the morning and the kind of mayhem of the night before, and the binman being out and the policeman arresting someone. And so, I'm a massive fan of electronic music. I think that there's a lot of crap out there, which I think it gets dismissed. House music gets dismissed as that awful banging thing. If you look around, there's some really amazing electronic music, but quite often it's not the best thing to play when you wake up. So, I'll be, probably listening to something a little bit quieter, as I'm a massive fan of Led Zeppelin, which I'm going back to more and more. But very kind of, Fela Kuti, Grace Jones, electronic music, I love it all. And it's all actually thanks to my sister, who has the most amazing record collection, when she used to come up and pick up her very uncool brother from school and drive him back to London. And I used to love going to stay with my sister, because she was a fair bit older than me and was kind of living an exciting life in the Portobello Road. And she just used to play me brilliant, brilliant music all the time. And it really kind of caught on. And it's, so music and fishing, going to fishing, coming back from fishing, with friends, listening to music. But you will never catch me fishing with earphones on. No. Which I have seen people do, but I think that's, you got to concentrate.
Yeah, nice. You've got me. Donny Hathaway, The Ghetto's probably a top 5 for me. And I just think that is soul. There's no better description of soul than that particular song. And
just want to dance to that song as well. It's, you can't help yourself.
Yeah, I was in London recently and it was on, and I was bopping away to it, and as a terrible Fender Rhodes player, I know that's a Wurlitzer he's playing, and that I'm geeking out a little bit now, but he is the man. It is just, you've just got me with that song. It's just such a amazing, emotional, wonderful piece of music, and yeah, that would be a good one.
For anyone who interested, I don't know if anyone's a fan of Vikings, which I love a series. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. But the title sequence is by a band called Fever Ray, who are Scandinavian, and they've done a song called "When I Grow Old," which is more towards the electronic-y things I love, and that's a favourite.
Nice.
When I Grow Old or When I Am Old, I can't quite remember.
Nice. I'm going to search that one out. I've just written it down. You've alluded to a few places. What is, for you, Val, your dream destination? What's the one place that, I'll give you two. What are the two places, if you could, because I'll give you a saltwater one and I'll give you a freshwater one. What are those places, if I have to put you on the spot and say choose, where would you want to go? It may be somewhere you want to return to, or it may be somewhere you've always dreamed of going to. Where are they?
I would love to go and fish Jardin de la Reina, Cuba, where I have fished before, and then I heard about this place, and I just don't have the money in the bank. But Jardin de la Reina, I would love to. Clipperton Island looks a bit too mad, but that would be, if I'm allowed two saltwater ones, I'd love to do Clipperton Island, but that's just brutal. Sun blasting down on you on a kind of bare island covered in oil barrels, but with a lot of fish swimming around. And rivers, I think that I really want to go and actually fish for trout, not salmon, in Iceland. There's amazing trout fishing there. And I've never really done the steelhead run anywhere, so I would have loved also to go. Actually, no, wipe both of those. I want to go to Mongolia and catch a taimen.
Yep, that's a fair shout. Although I wouldn't discard steelhead, I have to say. They are an
I do want to do that,
fish.
But I think the idea of trotting around on tiny horses with your rods just looks really fun.
So we've come full circle, haven't we? We've gone on. We've said how you didn't want to go on a horse, and now perhaps we come full circle back again.
So we have.
Yeah, but taimen, amazing fish. Yeah, there's Clipperton. We had that. I think we had a piece in. Tim Pilcher wrote a piece for us about the exploratory trip there years back, put on by somebody or other. Sounded absolutely amazing. Bluefin Trevally.
I mean,
all sorts of, yeah.
I mean, people trying to get over the reef, and boats flipping, and kit lost, and fail, go back, try again. I mean, it looks not for the faint-hearted. But I'd love to catch a rainbow runner.
Yeah, I've caught small ones, but not like those guys were catching. But that's the wonderful thing. And it seems to me as though your passion for it all, the obsession that started with a cutthroat on the Blackfoot, is still running as deep for you, isn't it?
I think, big fish are exciting. And prolific places are exciting. But I would finish this by saying, if I'm wearing a pair of shorts and I've got a jam jar full of worms that I've gone and found by lifting up big stones or moving bits of garden machinery, and I've got a tiny little 5-foot, very whippy rod with a tiny hook and a little bubble float on it, and I'm sitting there, in a small wood with wild garlic all around me, watching my float dibble off. I'm so lost in that world that I would say it gives me as much pleasure as standing there with a GT stripping me bare.
Yeah, nice. Like that. That's a lovely way to round things off. Val, it's been brilliant speaking to you. How can people find you on social media, websites, gin places? How can people find you?
Well, that's very kind. I'd love people to look at what we're doing in Norway, which is taking the world's greatest chefs up to the Arctic Circle to cook in the small hotel who I work with, and at the same time learning crafts. So come up there, eat the amazing food of, Thomas Parry or Richard Corrigan or whatever, and then go home having made some wonderful things. That's called Holmen Lofoten, Holmen, Lofoten, like the islands on the northwest of Norway. The gin is called Heppel. Heppel gin. I hope you try it, and please, martini. If you're making a martini, 10-1 with vermouth, by the way, and never shake it, stir it. And then please find me on Instagram. On my website's kind of currently under a little bit of change. So I'm Valentine Warner 49. I was Valentine _Warner, which is still on Instagram. Annoyingly, I can't get it down. But Valentine Warner 49. Not my age. It was my age, and now I have to pretend it's my lucky number because, of course, I was going to turn 50. What a moron! Anyway, Valentine Warner 49 on Instagram and Twitter. I just can't be bothered with the rows, so yeah, find me on Instagram. And thank you very, very much, Mr. Tyjas, for a lovely, lovely hour or so.
You're more than welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today, Val. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast.
Pleasure.
Everyone, that's the end. That's a wrap. This has been another episode of the Fly Culture podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. If you have, please consider subscribing, and there'll be some more very, very soon. Thanks very much for listening.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.